Welcome back to Podcasting for Your Spiritual Business. This is Kim Parkinson, and today we are continuing our summer series on the podcast basics. Today, we're talking about podcast cover art. There's that Boston, just popped right out. All right, so what is it? Why do you need it? And, how do you make it? What's the elements to it? What do you need? All that. We're just going to dive right in today because perhaps you already have started a podcast and maybe you're like, you know what? I'm thinking about changing my podcast cover art. Or maybe you have some other ideas or other thoughts on episode art. Now, we'll talk about that a little bit too. So, podcast cover art needs to be between 1400 and 1400 pixels as a square. And it needs to be maximum of 3000 by 3000 pixels. Again, square. Now, Apple Podcasts prefers it to be on the larger side, prefers it to be JPEG or high quality, and it needs to be under or 512 kilobytes. I think that's what the KB stands for, right? Kilobytes, KB? I think so. I'll ask my son. he's the computer expert around here. But Apple is really the one that's like the benchmark standard that holds on to that. And so that's what you need to know. So what is it for? And that's a really great question. So if you've ever opened up a podcast distribution platform, which hopefully you have, and a podcast distribution platform is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Podcast Addict, any one of those places where you listen to podcasts that's really maybe not necessarily on your laptop or your computer, but on your phone or a device like that. So iPad, things like that, Kindle, maybe, I'm not sure. I've never tried to download a podcast on my Kindle. So I don't know that. I don't know, but the other ones, definitely your phone and your iPad or your personal device of that type. If they have a distribution platform, usually what will happen is if somebody types in some kind of a keyword to get to your podcast cover art shows up. And that is usually pretty colorful, right? And sometimes there's people and they just do black and white, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they're usually pretty colorful. You can change those out anytime within your hosting platform, but don't be too quick to change that often, because you don't want people to lose it. But on the flip side, now a lot of platforms will allow you to do episode art. So very specific to the episode. What happens? People will first see your podcast cover art. That is the basic of your podcast. That's all the way across every platform. And then when they click on a specific episode, if you have a cover art for that episode, that will show up. I don't do cover art for each episode or episode art for each one. I just, I have other things to do. Does not mean that you can't do it. And maybe you have a really great way of being able to do that, or you really want the summer series would have been a perfect opportunity for me to have specific cover art for the summer series. Maybe you'll see that. Maybe you won't. We'll see. But the episode or the podcast cover art I'm talking about right now is the one that everybody sees when they go to the hosting platforms. Goes to the distribution platforms and they see what your podcast is about. Now, here is a few tips and tricks I'm going to tell you about this. You really want the words that you want to be known for to be the biggest words you can put on that 3000 by 3000 pixel podcast cover art. Because when people look, and they're looking usually on a tiny little device, yes, phones have gotten bigger over the years, but the cover art is still pretty small on the inside of the apps, right? So we really want them to be able to see. And when they're searching, they're even smaller, right? We're not talking about when they're actually listening. Those actually are bigger than when they're doing the search. Those have a tendency to be pretty darn small. And by pretty darn small, I mean maybe like half inch by half inch, 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch, something like that. So whatever your keywords are, make those stand out, right? Make those be the words that maybe have a contrast to the background. And perhaps go from, 1 to 2,999 pixel You want it to go all the way across, right? You want it to be as big as you possibly can so people don't miss it. Any kind of contrasting colors there, perfect for that as well. You just want it to be something that people aren't like, what does that say? Oh, never mind. It's too hard. I'm going to move on because maybe something else catches their eye. So there's that too. So you want it to be readable within that space. That's important. Now, a lot of people feel like they really want to put their branding on that. So your branding colors are great if you have those. You can absolutely put those on. But if you have a scroll type font that you're like, I absolutely love this font, it's my most favorite font, please double check to make sure that people can actually read it. My view here is leave the font, the scrolly font, for Instagram, for TikTok, for all the other social media platforms, and for your host platform, for the distribution platforms, make it so that it's just boring font. Make it so that it's readable. If people can't read it, they're probably not going to stop. Possibly, because if I'm looking at something, I'm either going to be going to be like, what the heck does that say? Or two, I'm going to be like, what does that say? There's one or the other. So don't fall into the trap of those people that are like, I don't know what that says. I'm scrolling on, right? We want it to be really something that is easily read, easily findable. So make that font kind of boring, something really big. League Spartan is a really big one. I think I use Prada, Prata. I think I've used other ones that are just really boring sans serif or serif fonts that are big and bold. And, Montserrat's a good one. Laura is a good one. Lato is a good one. All of those, just boring fonts, because you want it to be something that people can read and something people can identify with right away. And that's for basically all of the fonts on top of your podcast cover art, but definitely for those ones that have the words that are most keyword searchable, the ones that are people that are looking for. For instance, my new podcast cover art, I updated it probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago now. It is podcasting for your spiritual business. I believe your and for is in a scroll type font, because you don't need to read that necessarily. If you see podcasting, spiritual business, you're going to know that's what it's about. So any kind of like for the little words, am, to, things like that, just leave those to whatever font you'd like. But the ones that really matter, make sure they're big and bold and all the way across the page, because you don't want people missing your podcast cover art. All right. So this cover art should definitely kind of have a vibe of who you are, what you're about, and what you're doing. I have some brand colors that are teal, so I just moved mine over to like a tealish color. So I really, really love that. I have it's kind of like maybe like some clouds. Mine used to be just a sunrise or sunset, either one, right? But I've since changed it, and I also just wanted it to be a little bit more bolder. So there's all the words all the way down are really nice, big, and bold. I don't have my face on it. Can you put your face on it? Sure. If your podcast name is pretty short and you don't need a whole lot of space, you could put your face on it. I don't necessarily think that I need to. I think that if you did a search, you would easily find my face. So I don't need to take up that space on the cover art to put my face on there. I really feel like that is wasted space for me, because again, if you just search my podcast or you search my name, chances are pretty good you're going to come up with my face anyway. So I'm okay with not showing that. If you are really imperative to you that you have your face on there, go ahead, put it on there. Just kind of put it in the corner. So bottom left, bottom right, somewhere like that. Don't have it the big bold and then the words around it, because really what's more important is the words so people can read it. Now, maybe you are Mel Robbins and you're listening to this. Hi, Mel, if you are. But if you are, then your face is probably more well-known than the title of your podcast. Although I think it's in her podcast title. But otherwise, if you're not, and you're not well-known, then people may not know who you are anyway. So having the name show up is actually more important because they're going to be interested in the name, then find out about you, then fall in love with you, and then hopefully want to work with you, or at least continue to listen to your podcast and give you those downloads every week. Keep it simple, one focal point, clear show title, clean font. Just keep that super simple when you're creating it. Okay, so where do you create this? My favorite is Canva. My absolute favorite is Canva. I do a lot of creating inside of Canva when I do this for clients or help clients. The nice part is you can share it. Graphic designers can actually create it. You can find somebody maybe on Fiverr or Upwork if you needed to, or maybe you have a VA that can create this for you, or maybe you do it yourself. Or Canva also has a ton of different templates that you can use. So even the free tier of Canva will offer you some templates that you can use for podcast cover art. Grab something that has the big bold fonts and something that you like about it, and then just kind of change it to your colors, your podcast title, obviously, and then go ahead and do any kind of changing to it. Canva is really good for having those particular pieces that you can move around and change. And remember that you'll want to, more likely than not, download that as a JPEG. That's going to be the smaller type file. So make sure it says high quality pictures or images or graphics or any of that you can get inside of the 3000 by 3000 pixels. Now make sure that you export that, and then you're going to upload that to your hosting platform. That's going to go in the settings of your hosting platform, whomever you choose. And here's the thing, you can change that ever so often. So I had one when I first started my podcast, and it actually was not the same name of the podcast because I started my podcast with a totally different name. Well, not totally different, but a different name than I have now. And then as I have evolved and as I've niched down and I have said, I have looked at my keywords, I now have a podcast name that I'm happy with. So at the 1-year anniversary of this podcast, I changed the podcast cover art to match the title of my podcast. And you know what? I think maybe every year I'll take a look at that and see how that goes, because you change, your niche changes, you pivot, your podcast pivots, you go in a different direction. And so having that, update that, I love that. I love that idea of changing out your podcast cover art ever so often with new and fresh imagery, new and fresh, cover images, colors, fonts, all that. Keep those listeners guessing, because once they've already found your podcast and they have clicked that follow button, they're going to get updates as long as they listen on a regular basis. If they don't listen on a regular basis, that's another whole story. But if they listen on a regular basis, they'll get updates. And so what will happen is you won't eliminate them from seeing your podcast. You'll just get new people to listen. So I love that too. Now, some of the other things that I do want to go over, I have little notes here because I wasn't even sure how to do this, not how to do this. I have used it before, but I've only used AI for podcast cover art in ChatGPT. Now, here's the thing I have found, and I don't know if this is true across the board. I will be honest, I don't know. But in ChatGPT, it creates the image, and then basically it's like, you can't change anything about it unless you ask it and ask it and ask it and ask it. And I'm not doing that. So I'm really very cautious about updating that, because if you just needed to make one small change, it might mean like a whole slew of other issues. So be careful about that, right? But I haven't created one in ChatGPT in a little while, so it could have updated. You know how they update all the time. I do now use Claude more than I use Chat. And I also been kind of dabbling a little in Gemini. And Claude, I think, does connect to Canva, which is nice. Maybe Chat now has that feature as well. I think it always did, but it wasn't a great connection. But some of the other choices that I know clients have used for other social media outlets or social media graphics is some of these ones that I'm going to mention here, because I have never used them, like I said, but they have, and they've been able to like really manipulate it. So give them a try if that is something that you want to journey down. So the first one that I came up with here, or that I did a search on and came up with, is Midjourney. Now I do have a client and she uses Midjourney for some absolutely stunningly gorgeous imagery. If you have ever been to the emeraldtemple.com's social media account, those are all created in Midjourney, and those are stunning. She does an amazing job. That is actually Julian Dubrow that does them. Her mother is Diana Dubrow that owns the Emerald Temple. I'm actually going to leave a affiliate link down below in case you want to go and see what they have. They actually sell holy oils and just single oils as well, not just ones that are blends, but singles. And amazing quality, amazing. But the graphics that Julian has been able to create through Midjourney is top notch, amazing. And she's able to actually manipulate it. Originally, when I was seeing some of these come through, originally I was seeing maybe people with a couple of extra fingers, but that has actually really reduced as AI has kind of evolved, right? And now they're just stunning. So go check those out if you want to see what those look like. And those are graphics. If you look in Instagram, they're graphics based on the square format. So you could definitely create something for a podcast cover art or episode cover art with this Midjourney. I've never used it, but she has. And it looks amazing. Now, again, I've mentioned ChatGPT. Another one here that came up for me is Adobe Firefly. I know zero about Adobe Firefly. If you know about Adobe Firefly and you've used it, excellent. But I think you do have to be in the Adobe world. And I do know that you would be maybe doing your editing Adobe, and maybe you would be doing other Adobe things. Adobe's like a whole packet of stuff. And so if you are into Adobe and you are really in that world, then maybe you have been using Firefly. I don't know. So give it a try if you have it and see how that works for you. Other ones that popped up was Ideogram. Never heard of it. Honestly, again, never heard of it. I don't even know. It's Ideogram. Yes, I am reading from that because I just don't know. It's an option because it handles text and images better than most AI tools. Interesting. I guess I will have to give that one a shot too, just to give that a try and see how that works. And of course, Canva has its own AI generator too. So you could actually type something in if you really needed to. But bottom line, I love Canva. I love to have that ability to use a template, make the template my own. Maybe I don't even start with a template because a lot of times I really start with the words as big as I possibly can within the 3000 by 3000 pixels. And then I will go from there based on the client or my brand colors and make sure that I have what I like in the background. And then usually if you work with me and I create a couple of different cover arts for you, I'll create like 3 different ones. And then we kind of just go from there and see which one works best for you. And sometimes it's a mix. Sometimes there's a couple pieces need to be put together. And remember, it's changeable anytime. So even after you launch, if you're like, you know what, I've already done episodes that move in this direction and I need to change a keyword or I need to change something about the cover art, do it. Absolutely. Do it. There's nothing wrong with that. So again, my recommendation is Canva, although I have heard really excellent things about Midjourney. And then just create your cover art or keep up with your cover art. Change your cover art on occasion if you want. You can do it even after 600 episodes. I think it's just a great thing that there's so much flexibility within podcasting that you aren't tied to anything at any time for any piece of the podcast puzzle, which is great. So make sure that you can really read your title, which has those keywords in it, hopefully, and make the font big, bold, and something that is contrasting to the background color. When you do that, download that as 3000 by 3000 pixels, under 512 kb. I think I said 12, and for Apple. And then what you're going to do is upload that to your hosting platform. Same rings true for the episode art, all the same features, everything. It's just every episode, when you upload the episode, there is a section there and it asks if you would like to upload art. Libsyn has it, Captivate has it, Buzzsprout has it. All of those ones that I've used have it. So if you want to, you're welcome to. Plenty of shows rebrand year after year. You can do that as well. I would leave it for at least 3 months unless something really calls to you to change it right away. But I would definitely leave it for at least 3 months and see how that works each time. And keep up with your podcast basics and just kind of zhuzh them up every once in a while, right? Make them a little bit different and see where that goes, because you never know. You never know. All right. Where your voice flows, your business grows. Until next time. This is Kim Parkinson, and you're listening to Podcasting for Your Spiritual Business. See you soon. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me today. If you're ready to deepen your visibility and grow your podcast in a way that feels aligned, come join my email list at kpcreativemedia.com/newsletter, where I share exclusive guidance, support, and next steps. And if this episode resonated, I'd be so honored if you left a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the most powerful ways to support the show and help other spiritual women discover it. Until next time, keep showing up and sharing your voice.